You learn the basic blues shuffle and you feel pretty good about it. That is until you see someone like Robin Ford playing a 12-bar blues using funky chords all over the neck. You need a few of those tricks up your sleeve, and in this lesson, I'll share 4 slick chord tricks to expand your blues rhythm parts. And at the end of the video, we're going to bring them all together in an upbeat jam full of bluesy chords. We'll keep the shuffle pattern as the backbone for our jam, but we can level up by adding dominant 7th chords to the mix. 7th chords are a major triad with a flat 7, and it's that flat 7 that gives you the bluesy flavor that we're looking for. So here's one way you might mix in a dominant 7 into our groove. Okay, there's a bit more going on than just adding the dominant 7th chord. I added some interest by moving the chord around and embellishing it. Let's unpack this. So if we were to play this as a shuffle pattern, we might play something like that, but we're going to incorporate some 7th chords to really spice things up. And this part of the riff is over A, so I'm going to play an A7 chord, but I don't want to even play this full bar chord. I'm going to make things a little bit easier and just play the real heart of the chord here. This is the G on the 4th string, 5th fret, the C sharp on the 3rd string, 6th fret, and the E on the 2nd string, 5th fret. That little shape is pretty easy to just move around. And you'll notice in the riff that I did that. It's a simple way to just embellish this. You can go up a little bit by 1 fret really, and then back down even. I chose to go down and kind of play with the chord. And just kind of stab it in a rhythmic way that feels good to you in the moment. You can use this 7th chord idea over the other chords in the progression, and you can also mix in a few other voicings of 7th chords to expand the sound. And you'll see this in the jam at the end of the video, but for now, let's explore something slightly different. Let's trade a few 7th chords for 9th chords. 9th chords add 1 extra tone to the dominant 7th chord, the note 1 step above the octave. That's the 9th. It's the 9th scale degree, and it's perfect for our example. So use the 9th as you would a 7th chord. It's an easy swap. And in the example, we're leaning into the 9th chord sound by subbing it in for a D7. As a nice little bonus, the shape we used for D9 opens up a very classy move that you should know, the sliding 9th. When the chord progression rolls around to the D7 chord, you might choose this chord. This familiar chord shape for playing D7 comes from this C7 shape. You can think of it that way. And if we're going to turn this into a 9th chord, what we have to do is play the note that is a whole step above the octave. So here's the root D, here's the octave D, there's a whole step above it. It's an E. Now we could take this shape and just bar with our little finger to get that. And we get a perfectly usable D9. But there's another way to fret this that enables something really cool. If we play the D with our middle finger instead, play the F sharp with the index, and then bar with the ring finger across the top 3 strings, that's all at the 5th fret here, we get this. And we get the note on top. That's really nice. And we also get the ability to do the sliding 9th, straight out of the Stormy Monday playbook, where you can slide the top 3 notes of the chord up 2 frets and then back. So when you're playing over D9, you can slide up and back, or like I did, just go up 2 frets and then slide down into the chord. It's a really classy sound. And again, listen to Stormy Monday to hear that done expertly by T-Bone Walker. 9th chords can have up to 5 notes in them: the root, 3rd, 5th, flat 7, and the 9th. And sometimes you can play them all comfortably like we did with the D9 with the root on the 5th string, but sometimes it's better to drop a tone. It's kind of weird, but it sounds great. Do Did you notice something about that? I played something in place of the A7 chord, right? So it should be an A chord, but that chord didn't have an A note in it at all. Pretty weird, right? This is a rootless ninth chord. You still feel the A chord and that dominant sound at its heart, but there's no root, there's no A. Let's get our hands around this voicing. This is a classy chord, and you can hear this in G in Stormy Monday. But we're going to play it out of A. And it's a rootless ninth chord voicing. So it helps to visualize where the root is since you're not playing it, right? We always think about roots. We got to go, we're playing the A chord in this part of the progression, right? So if we're going to play something without a root, we need to orient ourselves. The root is right here on the sixth string. So if you look at this finger, and we're going to break down the fingering in just a second, but if you look at your index finger, think about it. The root is drop a string to the sixth string and then up one, all right? That directionally is where you should be visualizing the root, okay? Don't come here right underneath the root, drop back and start off of the major third of the chord. That's how we build the rootless ninth. We've got our third C sharp here, and this is on the fifth string at the sixth fret. And I'm playing that with my index finger. And then my ring finger is going to play the next string. That's the fourth string at the fifth fret, the G note. That is going to be the flat 7, right? So if we just add the root here, you can definitely hear the dominant chord vibe happening here, right? But we're not playing the root. So we're taking that away because we need that finger to play the B on the third string, fourth fret. That is the 9. Remember, it's got to be an whole step above the octave. There's the octave. There's a whole step above it. So we got B, right? And then finally, we're dropping the little finger on the E on the second string. And that's the fifth, right? So if we go and look at the tones that we've fretted, we've got the major third, the flat 7, the 9, and the fifth. And again, no root. And we can do that cool move where we drop down a fret or up a fret and move this around. And we can also just hit some cool stabs with the chord like we did. In the example to mix things up. Rootless ninth chord voicing. But there's something else interesting happening here. This shape pulls double duty. What if we think of the lowest note in the voicing as the root? In this case, our rootless A9 becomes a C sharp minor 7 flat 5, also called a half-diminished chord. They're both a mouthful, but this is a great approach chord for the D7 and especially a D9. So you might think of this as a C sharp minor 7 flat 5 just because that is a really handy way to approach a ninth chord, specifically a D ninth chord. Why? Because we've got this half step movement that's happening between these two chords. If you watch what happens string by string, you'll see that we move up a half step on the fifth string. That makes sense. C sharp to D, C sharp minor 7 flat 5, which is a mouthful, to D9, right? But then also what's happening on the fourth string is this is dropping down. So we kind of have this trading on the fifth string and the fourth string. It's a really cool movement harmonically. But then we also come up a half step from that B to the C. If you watch that carefully, it's there on the third string, fourth fret, it's coming up. If I could just do it this way, but it helps to refinger this like we've learned how to do our ninth chords. But that movement, that half step movement makes this a really nice approach chord. Doesn't really matter if you call it a rootless A9 to D9, or if you call it a C sharp minor 7 flat 5 to D9, your choice, but know the sound because it's really usable. Yeah, I know that rootless ninths, minor 7 flat 5, and half diminished, all that might sound a bit too music theory for some, so if your eyes glaze over at the mere mention of music theory, then maybe this will help. These technical terms, think of them as nothing more than labels for sounds. Labeling the sound can help you call it up when you need it, the same way we label these G, C, and D chords. Here's another idea that you're definitely going to want to stick a label on so you can use it later. The diminished 7th chord can really punch up a blues progression. It's unsettled, and there's actually a cool trick to this chord that makes it incredibly fun to play. I'll show you that in a bit, but first let's hear it in a progression first. The diminished 7th chord works really well as a substitute for basically any dominant 7th chord. Let's map it out on the fretboard, learn how to use it, and then I'll show you that cool trick that I mentioned. This is the diminished 7th chord that we're going to unpack here. But before we do that, I want to take a step back, way back to probably one of the first chords you ever learned, a D major chord, right? If we just look at the top 3 strings, strings 3, 2, 1, take a look at that shape. We've kind of been using that, and we're about to use it again. If we take this and bump it up a string set, meaning toward the ceiling here, I'm going to have that same shape, but just on strings 4, 3, and 2, right? Now, it doesn't sound like a D major anymore, but let's take it and bump it up again, all right? And then this time, let's add the little finger to the 3rd string. Nestle that right under the ring finger, right? This is the shape, and you might recognize that we just covered it as the rootless 9th chord, right? We've been playing it here in A. We also called it the C sharp minor 7 flat 5, right? Both work. And what we're going to do from here is take that same shape. Again, it's kind of got this D shape at the heart of it and bring it up a string set. So from our rootless 9th, now we're going to move this way, down toward the floor. Don't move the shape, just drop everything down a string set, okay? And now we have our F sharp diminished 7 chord. Now, why are we playing it from F sharp? Well, this works as a good substitution for a dominant chord, but you build the diminished 7th off of the major 3rd. So if we go here to our D, which the D9 is a dominant chord, it has a flat 7 in it, and it's got a 9th in it, which is the way we've been using it primarily here. But here's the major 3rd. We've been fretting it every time we've played D so far. So what we're going to do is let that diminished 7 fall in line, and you can use this as a substitution for the D9. There are other ways to do this, but I really like going from the 3rd of the chord. All right, so about that cool trick, the diminished 7th chords are built by stacking minor 3rds. Start with a root, layer on a minor 3rd on top of that, then one on top of that, and then another minor 3rd on top of that. And you end up with a root, minor 3rd, flat 5, and double flat 7. Each tone is a minor 3rd away from the next tone, either up or down. This chord is symmetrical. So moving the shape up by a minor 3rd, that's 3 frets on the guitar, will get you the same tones. And we did this in the example. They're just rearranged. You could keep going. It's kind of like an infinite loop with this really cool, bluesy, unsettled kind of chord sound. This is a handy trick, and it makes some really interesting moves, pretty easy to play on the